Hello, this is Teresa DeWitt Pierce from Whimsical Card Studio. Welcome back to my channel for a new card making tutorial. I call this a split background technique, and I will have a part 2 video in a couple of days showing a variation on this technique. Today I'm using two stamp sets. One is from Altenew and the other from Wplus9. Both are citrus themed, but with very different in scale. Before making these cards, I tested a variety of inks on the Altenew set to find color combinations I liked and referred back to this card. I call this a recipe card because it helps me quickly find color combos that have worked for me in the past. Today I will be using Catherine Pooler inks because they worked very well for this backgrounds. I imagine it would be possible to use other dye inks, however I did not try this with any other brand. Starting with the Altenew set, I placed 3 of the smaller layering set stamps on my card panel. I will be doing this technique in a production style, only changing the position of my stamps after stamping all 3 of the colors on different panels. As the video title mentions, I am doing a giveaway to one lucky winner for an original size MISTI stamping tool, as shown in this video. If you're not from the US, you are still eligible to win, however you would have to pay for shipping wherever you are. If you choose to enter the contest from another country, please know that you're accepting these terms. If you want further details on the giveaway, you may visit my blog. The link is in the description below for full details. You can get multiple entries for this contest by doing the following. The first thing you need to do is listen for the keyword I will call out during this video. Just hang on to the word because you will need it later. Please don't write the word in a comment below because this will disqualify you from that one entry. Next, please leave me a comment below to tell me if you found this technique helpful. If you already follow my channel and comment, you will get a second entry. If you subscribe, please hit the bell icon to ensure you're notified when part number 2 is published, which will give you the next keyword. What you will be doing with these words is fill in a sentence when the third and final video is published in July. I will tell you how to use the keywords to get your entry into Rafflecopter at that point. For those of you who have been watching my videos for a while, you probably noticed I've been away from YouTube. It's mainly due to some technical issues and personal reasons. I do intend to get back onto my regular schedule of one video a week, so I'm hoping this giveaway makes up for the time I've been missing producing videos. Okay, with all that said, I wanted to share this because it is such a versatile way to use the stamps you have and stretch your supplies. Whether you stick with one color or several, this is not necessarily dependent on a given brand. After I finish all the stamping, I will be using some slightly different ways of finishing off the cards, so you can keep it really plain or you can add on and embellish more depending on what you want to get out of it. But I do think this is something that just about anyone, possibly even someone that's beginning card making, can use. Now that I'm getting down to this home stretch, I'll show you how I made all 3 of these panels different, even though they were stamped basically in a very similar way. Now I'm using the smaller stamps from the Wplus9 set to fill in some of the spaces left in between the larger layered stamps. I probably would have been a better idea to plan this out when I was stamping the entire panel and just put the smaller stamps on there to begin with, but I would have only been able to get them in one space at a time, and I thought it would be a little bit faster to do it this way. So you'll see me doing a similar thing on each of the other 2 panels, and then we'll move on to the last phase on how I split these up and finish the process with each one. So first, for each one of these, I will be trimming them down so that I'll at least have a frame on the finished card. In some cases, depending on how I'm splitting them up, I cut them to slightly different sizes. This one I ended up cutting down to an overall size of 4 by 5 inches. And What I'm going to do in this case is I'm using my T-square ruler on the back of the card, and I make sure that I have an inch from that side and draw with a pencil so that I have my diagonal line right there. And then I trim that so that I'll have two separate pieces. So this is the split and split the background. And the thing that I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to use some ink blending on the lower half of this split panel. And at first it is going to look pretty dark, and you may be wondering, why am I coloring over all that stamping I just did? But as the ink gets dry, it becomes a little more, not opaque, it's the opposite of opaque actually. You're able to see through and see the stamping that's underneath. So that's one of the cool things, is getting variation on the color by doing this technique. And in the case of this orange panel, I'm going to also cut it down to 4 inches in width. And I will cut it a little bit shorter as far as the long side, because I'm going to be cutting this into 3 sections, and there will be a space between each section. So roughly what I'm doing here is cutting down the panel to about half of the size, so it's at 2.5 inches there. And then I kind of played a bit before deciding exactly where to cut the top, because I wanted each piece to be a different size and for it to be pretty noticeable as far as the difference is concerned. And now that I've done this, I'm going to use that middle panel and do the ink blending on it. And this also happens to be where I made a mistake, because I wasn't being careful about well, not at this point, but you'll see it later. I wasn't careful in how I glued all the pieces together later, and the pattern wasn't continued. So this is the point in which I noticed that that was going on. Now down to the lemon layer, I'm going to do something a little bit different. Instead of just cutting or splitting the panel by just slicing it in half or in thirds or what have you, I'm going to use these 2 dies from this Hero Arts Infinity die set. And by the way, this is one of those things that I'd call a staple for the craft room. It allows you to cut all sorts of sizes of circles, so you can make frames and all sorts of different size openings. So this is something I am really glad that I went ahead and purchased, because it's already being used quite a bit in my craft room on various projects. So it's one of those basics I don't think you can skimp on. Of course, I guess it may depend on what kind of cards that you typically make. But as for me, I think it's been a good investment, and it's not all that much money. And as far as the prize I'm giving away, this MISTI is one of the best things you can have, especially if you love stamping. A positioning tool is a thing that makes such a difference in your life, and especially with layered stamping sets. But anyway, enough about that. I'm going to talk about what is going on here. I'm going to be cutting what looks like 2 circles out of this panel. My plan is to just use the innermost circle from what I'm die cutting here, but I'm not going to get rid of that band, or band, I'll call it band, around the circle in the middle, because I'm going to use it for spacing it whenever I glue this down to the panel. And one thing I am going to be doing differently with this one compared to the other 2 is I'm going to be using pattern paper behind the panel, because I felt like the light yellow color needed a little more pizzazz, and I thought, why not? It seems like pattern paper would be the perfect way to add to that. Anyway, before I get to that point, I'm doing the same thing I've done with the other 2 panels. I'm ink blending with the same color that I used for stamping on top of that circle that's in the center. Now, once it does have a chance to dry, it will be like the other ones, and you'll be able to see the stamping that I've done before through the yellow. So now I'm about to put together the first card, which is the lime colored set. So I'm stamping the sentiment from that excuse me, from that set onto a piece of black cardstock. I treated it with the powder ahead of time to keep static at bay. And I'm using the smaller half fruit section stamp in order to add some interest to the sentiment. So this is one of those things where I wanted to point out that combining sets that are similar can be to your advantage in having larger and smaller scale stamps. And this is the point where that is definitely more obvious as far as the sentiment. And as you can see, I totally flubbed up on the sentiment. I had to redo it again because I had not actually melted all the embossing powder. So anyway, I'm now using a temporary adhesive so that I can cut off the extra pieces that I don't need, as you can see me doing right now. I could not find my small scissors to save my life, so I had to grab the big bulky ones and get it done. And now I'm coming into the home stretch. I'm gluing the top panel and kind of maneuvering that in place. So that's the beauty of having a liquid adhesive. And speaking of liquid adhesives, this is definitely now my favorite. I was primarily using another liquid adhesive, and it's not that I don't like it, but this one has just worked out better, I think, because of the applicator bottle. It has a thin nozzle, so you can better control how thin or thick of a line of adhesive you get out of it. So those are two of the reasons that I've decided I really love this Nuvo liquid adhesive. So now, this is a step that you could totally skip or change up. I mean, you could use Nuvo drops to add some extra interest. You could splatter something onto the panel, but in my case, I happen to have sequins that were just the right color to match what I created here. Now, I don't even know where I got these sequins, so unfortunately that's one thing I won't be able to share with you, but you can get sequins from all sorts of places. So if you don't have those or Nuvo drops, you can totally skip this kind of step. It just adds something to the final project while not adding yet another color to it. And with that, I have completed the first card in this series of 3, and we'll be moving on to the next one shortly with the second variation on this theme. So on to the orange panel. Now that the ink is dry on the center panel, I'm treating it with the anti-static powder tool. I'm going to use VersaMark to stamp on the sentiment. And as you can see, my hair is blowing in the wind there. It was getting a little bit warm in the craft room, so I turned on the fan, and that's why you're seeing my hair just kind of in there in the frame. Anyway, so now I've added my powder and realized that I have an issue. I didn't stamp very well on that one end, so the word orange isn't quite complete, so I'm fixing it by using this perfect medium pen after having melted the other embossing powder that was already there. So I'm drawing in the part of the O that I missed before when I stamped it, so I don't have to start all over again. And I'm using, of course, the same embossing powder, and because this pen is not as fine as the actual stamp, I'm using this wonderful pen blade tool, which is useful for so many things, and in my case, very useful for scraping away some embossing powder, which can be difficult to do with a brush. So that's how I fix my little boo-boo here. And I will finish off the card. I'm just going to, of course, just glue on each layer and leave a little bit of white space in between. And you may have noticed that there are a couple of extra things I stamped that weren't on camera. So I pulled out one of the smaller stamps from the Wplus9 set. It was that fruit wedge, and I did the same embossing powder on that as the sentiment. And now it's time for keyword number 1. Yes, let me repeat. Time for you to record the first keyword in this three-part series for the MISTI drawing. The keyword is summer. So keep a hold of that word, keep it to yourself, and watch for the next video where you will get the second keyword. So now moving on to the third card that I'm making today, and this is using pattern paper. I happen to pick out this paper that has 6 different colors, so because of the pattern, I put my my background onto the middle of it, and then I'm just kind of backing into how to make it fit onto the card base. I ended up switching to different trimmers so I could line up the wire and get a more exact measurement, because I still wanted to have a little teeny tiny white frame around the edges when I was done trimming it, rather than having it go all the way to the edge. And because I didn't really want to measure, this is just how I chose to do it. Some of you may be better at that measuring and planning thing. Sometimes I just kind of am a fly by the seat of my pants. And after all the planning and practicing that went into this video, by this point I was just into, let me just make this work however I can make it happen. So now that I have this all together, I'm thinking about how am I going to glue this down, what order am I going to go in, and so forth. And I go ahead and add my liquid adhesive to the panel that will be on the top of the card, and just line it up pretty much square as I planned to before. And then I'm going to use the circle cutout, not because I'm going to actually use it on the card, but it's awesome that I kept it so that I have the perfect spacing whenever I add the inner circle, and that's why I'm using it. Once I have glued down the center of it, I'll just remove that outer ring from the card, and then around the edges you'll be able to see the pattern between the background that I made and the little center circle before I add the sentiment on to finish this card up. So I think it's looking pretty cute so far. I'm now going to go ahead and stamp on the sentiment in center. I'm going to use VersaMark ink, and I'm going to use white embossing powder in order to create the sentiment. I did consider what if I use black in this case, but considering the overall color scheme of the card, it just seemed like it would be too harsh. So in the end, I decided to use white. Yeah, it is a little bit light, but still I think I'm pretty happy with how it came out in the end. So here's a final look at all 3 of the cards. First, the lime theme colored card, followed by the beautiful orange theme colored card with the matching orange sequins, and of course, last but not least, the beautiful lemon card with the pattern paper. I so appreciate that you spent time with me today to watch a video, and I hope that you will subscribe if you haven't before, give me a big thumbs up, and watch other videos. And good luck in the contest. Thank you.